Hey, ladies and gentlemen, Chris here, Ghost of GBT on Reddit. Back once again. I took a week off because we got evacuated for this hurricane last weekend. But luckily, no damage to my house or any of my property. There's some trees down and stuff like that, but overall, not a big deal. But I'm back this week. Going to do another weekly charting video for you. And it doesn't look like we had too many results this week, so we should be able to just get through all of them. So I'm going to start right here at the top with BAC long, and then we'll go down the list. So Bank of America. So this has been sort of testing this, looks like 1625 or 1630 level. So yeah, I think if it gets over that, it could potentially make a run. It looks like it had a nice little dip on Thursday of last week. Not sure why. Let's see if there was some news related to it on Thursday. What day was Thursday? Today is the 16th, so Thursday would have been the 13th. Looks like it was probably just related maybe to the market gapping down. If I remember right, Thursday was a gap down in the market. Yeah. So Thursday was a gap down in the market also, which I think is why, Bank of America and all the bigger names gapped down as well. But it just kind of closed in the middle, and then the market gapped up the next day, and we came right back. So if it gets over 1620, 1630 area, it could potentially go on a run. Keep in mind it is Bank of America, so it's not going to be super crazy momentum stock or anything like that. You might get 1675 out of it or something like that. Also, as Big Bear 0083 here noted, there is a binary event. There's earnings on Monday pre-market, so that's obviously going to affect things. If it has good earnings, then obviously long is a lot better. But usually what I do in terms of earnings is just wait until after they release, and then I'll play it accordingly. So I'll be watching it Monday morning just to kind of see whether the earnings are good or bad and kind of what the market decides, and then make a decision from there. Next up, Sony, SNE long, and also posting AMD long. Yeah, I'm going to ignore that. Sony. So this one's kind of tricky to trade just because it's so gappy. It trades on, different exchanges, and so we just get, the reason that this is so gappy is because it's trading on the other side of the world, and so we get the gap based on wherever it closed on the other exchanges in Asia that it's trading on. So with that said, I don't personally trade stuff like this just because it's too unpredictable. It's just going to gap, and usually what happens on the US exchanges is it just gaps and it gets stuck. As you can see, a lot of these candles are just gap down and it just kind of sits there. Gap down, it just sits there. Gap up, it just sits there. So the stock doesn't really move. So I don't personally trade this type of ticker, so I wouldn't touch it. There's not really any specific pattern unless you're going to buy it and hold it for months and months and months. If we look at like a weekly chart, the buy was way back at the beginning of the year off of the 200-week moving average and off of what looks like this previous breakout level here. So it sort of looks like the easy money on this thing is kind of gone. If it got over on a weekly time frame, if it kind of broke out of that little flag that it's in right now over maybe 33, 34 bucks, then you might get a run up to this next resistance spot here in like the 3650s or 37s. But again, it's going to take so long to do it. It's going to be mostly filled with gaps. It's just not the type of thing that I trade. When I trade, I want to look for stuff that moves quickly so that I can get in and get it out real easy and real quick. So I wouldn't personally touch Sony, but if you're a more patient investor, a more patient trader, then maybe that's the type of thing that you're looking for. Next up, TPIC long. So not sure if this is an IPO or if this is just a rebranded spin-off from another company. I don't know anything about the company personally, but it looks like I've only got data dating back to July 22nd. So there's not a ton of data It does look like they had some bad news on the 11th here, so let's see what the reason for that was. Diversified machinery. And it does look like this was an IPO. I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like this was an IPO. So there's not a ton of data on it, but it doesn't look like it's doing well so far. I mean, I guess from the IPO price, but I don't know what the IPO price was. So, if the IPO price was $12, then it's doing great. If the IPO price was 25, then it's doing terrible. So I would have to know specifically what the price was and where it's supposed to be before I could decide, if it's good or not. As far as the 11th, looks like they entered into some new agreement, a couple of new contracts with General Electric, which people, for whatever reason, did not like. So, if you believe that the new contracts that they've entered are actually a good thing, then, maybe this represents a buying opportunity. From a purely technical standpoint, it sort of looks like it might bounce, but it did also just go right through the 200-day moving average. So what I would prefer to see on something like this is for it to actually pop back above the 200-day moving average and then hold above it and indicate, that it's going to continue its previous uptrend, because it did break its trend, which is obviously a concern. But if it can pop back above, say, 1850 and maybe consolidate in a flag or something like that above 1850 and below, say, 19 or 1950, then, maybe it can resume its previous uptrend and this is just kind of a shakeout. But for right now, it seems like it's a little bit too early to tell. So I'd be watching it, and also considering that news. I don't know anything about this news personally. So, you might want to dig into that and then possibly watch it to see if it can reclaim and hold over the 200-day moving average. If it can, then, it might have a shot. Next up, what do we got? First Solar, Cara, Skyline, CMG. Cara, Skyline, and CMG. And then we have Maine, Taser, 1-800-Flowers. Maine, Taser, Flowers, IMNP, and eBay. I think IMNP came up once before. Maybe not. It might have been IMPV. But we'll see. Okay, so next up, First Solar. Yeah, so these solar companies actually, in the wake of some comment that Clinton made, I'm not sure what it was on Friday, but there were a few solars that took off. SunW took off. RGSE attempted to. It got a little bit of volume kind of midday, but then it sort of fizzled. What did SunPower do? SunPower didn't really do anything. Solar City. Solar City looks good too, actually. Yeah, so these solars, I think they were running sort of in the wake of something that Clinton said. Not sure what it was. Probably something to do with greenhouse gases or whatever. But these solars, I think, look pretty good. First Solar, the 5-minute chart looks like it was consolidating all day. As long as it maintains this trend, then, I think it's probably in good shape. So, for me, if I was looking for a quick day trade or maybe a swing trade type of entry, then I would probably just be watching this to see, if it can hold above 39.30 or 39.20, and potentially break this previous high of day, which was 39.94, and then on the daily you're going to have 40.05 and 40.33, and then 40.50. And then you have a gap fill up to 41.62. So I would think if it can get above 40 and start trending above 40, then it has the potential to get into this gap and maybe make a run up into the 41.50s or low 42s potentially. So that's what I would be looking for, I guess, is just that, morning strength. I'd want to see something like this, except out of this, trend line here, out of this pattern. If it breaks underneath, if it breaks down, then your support is going to go back to probably something on the daily down here in the low 37s, and so you're going to need a little bit more consolidation if it won't hold this pattern. Looking at the 15 and the 30 minute, we see a similar type of thing. It's a little bit extended on the 30 minute. I like to see these things closer to their 50 period exponential moving average just in general, whether I'm looking at a 5-minute chart, which it's right at the 50 period moving average. But when determining, how extended a stock is, I always look at multiple time frames. And so you can see it's kind of extended on the 30 minute. It looks like it could potentially pull back here into the low 39s, maybe even high 38s, and still be okay. But then looking at the 60 minute, it's sort of sitting right in the middle of its breakout range. So it's got some potential. It just needs to kind of convince me as far as what it's going to do. So I'd be watching to see if it holds over 39.30s and pushes up through 40. If it does, then, just join the trend, or you can try to catch the breakout here, maybe 39.65 or 39.75 if you can get it in that area, and just throw a stop right underneath this bottom trend line. So there you go. There's First Solar. Moving on to Cara Therapeutics. Is this a long? Yeah, this is a long. I don't see any reason to long this right now. It didn't close strong. It sold off all day on Friday. It's just kind of made an indecision candle here at the bottom. It's got to give me an indication of strength before I'll buy it long. Whenever I want to buy something long, I want to see it close on highs. If you look at something like this FH, even though this is kind of chasey, if you're going to buy this thing way up here, it seems like it's kind of chasey. It still has that residual momentum. So, this is what I want to see when a stock has the potential to go up, is I want to see that close on the highs. I want to see it driving all the way into the close to indicate that it's going to continue the next day. And on Cara Therapeutics, we actually see the exact opposite of that, which is, kind of fading off and closing on its lows. So doesn't necessarily mean it can't be a long on the longer term time frame. If we look at like that, it does look like it could potentially be in a bounce spot, but it needs to give me an indication of strength at this bounce spot before I'll be willing to trade it. So there's Cara. Skyline. The infamous Skyline. I got to take the 200-day moving average off because this thing has been flattened so much you can't even see the pattern anymore. So I don't know. I mean, this stock is just kind of junk. They had this news that they made a deal with Electronic On-Ramp back here. And then, there were some questions as to whether or not they were going to be able to stay listed, and they approved the reverse split. So they're going to be reverse splitting at some point within the next few months. And, a lot of times when these stocks just get into this reverse split dilution type of thing, you just end up with a GBSN style of move where we can see, this thing did a reverse split, gaps up to $5, and then within a month, it's back down to 0, and, now it's delisted. So I can kind of see something similar happening. If you look at the charts, you see a very, very similar pattern here. This massive, massive collapse because of the dilution. And then looking at Skyline, almost the exact same thing. So I don't personally see any reason to long this. I had some volume on Friday, but, if you're going to long it, for me, this is just a day trading stock. If it pops up on my scanner and it's up 120% or 100% or something like that, I'll trade it in and out on these types of days where you have like a big giant candlestick like this or like one of these ones. I'll trade it in and out on days like that, but I don't really try to predict like multi-day type moves on stocks like this, just because in the end, they're most likely just going to go to 0. So my personal opinion on Skyline is I would leave it alone. I just play this thing when it gets a lot of volume and when it starts moving a lot. Chipotle. Chipotle's back right at its trend line again. This one's sort of like AMD. I feel like we analyze this stock a lot, and people just seem to be, real interested in it. So I would say, when you see a reversal type of candle like this one, where it kind of does like a little doji thing or it closes on its highs, you don't want to buy it on a candle where it closes on its lows, because that just means it's going to keep selling off. So what I'd be looking for is, since it is sort of at a trend line right now, it's at its bounce point, look for one of these green candles or a reversal candle, whether it's a close on the highs or a hammer candle or whatever. Just look for some kind of a reversal, some kind of an indication of strength, and then buy it and let it grind back up to the top of the channel. And when it gets to the top of the channel, you sell it, and then you rinse and repeat. And over the course of months and months and months, this is going to coil up into, a small, very tight range, and then it's most likely going to have a big breakout, but that's months down the road. So those are my thoughts on Chipotle. I like it for a long. I would just want to see that indication of strength like I always do. Main. Main Street Capital. So this does not look like a long to me. This actually looks like the beginnings of a pretty overextended short. This looks like it just broke its major trend line. So no, I would definitely not long this. This is the type of stock where you definitely don't want to long it when it's just broken its major uptrend and it's sitting on its lows. It's closing on its lows. If it reclaims this trend line, and starts testing these highs again around 34.70, then, you can chase it up, because this stock is, it's been uptrending long enough that, the chances of you missing the uptrend if you buy it on a breakout are very, very small. But if you buy it just as it's starting to break, right now everyone's looking at this thing going, okay, it's tapped 34.70 3 times now, and now it's finally broken its uptrend. This is a short, and so everyone is going to start most likely pushing this down. So until it reverses and reclaims that trend, I have zero interest in something like this for a long. Taser. So I don't know what the news was on Friday, but I know that Digital Ally had some news. And Taser always kind of runs either in conjunction or against Digital Ally, in conjunction with or against Digital Ally. So it looks like, so it actually, DGLY won a lawsuit against Taser. So, DGLY gets the gap up, and it looks like it faded. Doesn't seem like people really cared too much about this lawsuit. It hardly even did any volume, barely 300,000 shares, which for Digital Ally is really, really small. When this thing gets a lot of momentum behind it, it'll do 10 or 15 million shares in a single day. There were days back in like 2014 when this thing was doing 20 or 25 million shares in a single day. So, I don't really think, it doesn't really seem like anyone cared about that settlement. Taser, similarly, they lost and it gapped up. So I guess, what I would have to say is, technically speaking, it doesn't really look like there's any, glaring reason to buy Taser right now. What I would say, though, is if there's a fundamental reason related to this lawsuit that DGLY just won against them, then there may be something that I'm missing. But from a purely technical perspective, I don't see anything. It's sort of at a low point, I guess. But, what is low, right? We can't really, there's no very clear pattern here. We had a gap down and then we had a gap up. There's no indication of strength, no indication of weakness. It just kind of closed in the middle of its range. Over here we had a gap up and it faded all day and closed red. Here we had a gap down and it faded all day and closed red. And then we had a gap down and it came back and closed green. Not green, but at its highs. And then a gap up the following day. The stock just sort of seems all over the place. So for me, there's got to be some sort of fundamental reason to buy this thing. Right now, I see nothing, technically speaking. Digital Ally, on the other hand, has, if it can show a little bit of strength, it does have this strongly consolidating pattern that it's been in for quite some time now. So I would think, this thing gets over 625 and starts getting a little bit of momentum behind it. This could make a big run, especially, coming over these big sort of multi-year levels. I could definitely see this thing make a massive sort of 100 to 200% move upwards. Not sure when or what it's going to take to get it there, but it seems like it kind of has that look to me. Okay, 1-800-Flowers. This is actually sort of similar to DGOI. I would just want to see a more, a close closer to the top of this range before I were going to make any sort of investment in it or any sort of trade. I want to see this thing close up near like 950 or 935 before I touched it. Right now, it's just sitting at the bottom of the range. If you want to buy it here, you can anticipate and just set your stop loss, very tight under, say, 890 or something along those lines. But, the sacrifice, obviously, for anticipating is that you have no indication of strength. So you have a lower probability, even though you have better reward to risk. What I personally like is to have higher probability and slightly lower reward to risk, just because I'm the type of person, I want my trades to work. I don't necessarily care if they're super high reward to risk. It's nice if they are, but what I care about more is that they work, because that way, I'm constantly winning, which helps you, make money as you're sort of emotionally involved in it, right? If you're constantly losing, but, you're taking really good reward to risk trades, that's going to start to weigh on you emotionally. So personally, I prefer to have higher probability and buy, these breakouts and buy the confirmation, as opposed to buying at the bottom of the range. But, you can do it either way. And honestly, I think either way, this one looks like a decent long. The only thing I would say is just remember that, if you're buying it at the bottom of the channel, you have lower probability than if you're buying it at the top of the channel. So, if you buy it at the bottom and it doesn't work, then you just get out. You just got to kind of honor your stop loss. Next up, IMNP. So this one's just been sort of slowly fading away. I don't really see any, the volume's kind of dying. It is consolidating. Who is text messaging me? It is consolidating, over a long period of time, but it looks like it's probably going to need like some kind of a PR or some kind of news to get it moving. Once it comes over this big, giant consolidation, or this big sort of falling wedge, then you might have something. It'll probably make a big upward move once it gets over this, but it's going to need some sort of catalyst to do it. So I like the pattern. It would be on my radar for sure. Watch to see at some point when they hopefully release some news, to get it moving. That might be what it takes to get it going. All right, and last one, eBay. It has a big gap to fill. Looks like this was a split. So technically, it's actually making all-time highs if it breaks over 33 here. Yeah, it looks decent. Had a nice close, nice strong close on Friday. At least in terms of volume. In terms of the price range, not so much. It looks like this 32.25 seems to be sort of the trigger spot for it. So if we look at like a 60-minute, maybe even a 30-minute. It's tough. Anytime you have a chart where you've got to mess with it this much to find a clean level, it's probably, not the greatest pattern. So maybe 32.25. I'm stretching a little bit here, I think, just to make it, so I'm not saying no to every single symbol. But this is not something that I would trade. None of these really are things that I would trade, as a day trader. Maybe TPIC if it reclaims that trend. First Solar, I definitely would trade if it can break out of that pattern that we saw on the 5-minute. Cara needs news. Skyline needs news. CMG is going to be a slower mover. Main breaking its uptrend. Taser, you got it. It's just kind of all over the place. So all of these things, they're not really stuff that I prefer to trade. I try to trade the more cleaner type, more clean type of patterns that have like a very defined risk level, very defined reward level. However, eBay is a strong company. It's a strong stock. So, you can probably buy this thing. It'll probably work, but it's just going to take a while. So you're going to have to be patient with it. It looks like maybe 32.25, 32.30 would be a decent trigger spot for it. If it can get over that, then you might get a run back up towards 33, and then above that, you're back at all-time highs. So there you go. Thanks for listening. By the way, I'm going to actually be sending out a newsletter, which I've set up over the course of the last couple of weeks. I've sent out a few of them so far. Just some ideas similar to this with like some charts marked up and stuff. So I'll throw a link to that in the description if anyone wants to sign up for it. It's going to be completely free, so you can feel free to jump on the list. And I will talk to you all next week. Feel free to leave questions, comments in the comments section here if you have anything else that you want me to go over. And I will talk to y'all later. Peace.